Terra's Story, Chapter 28. Still, here I am, on the roof of some building, God only knows where. She pulled herself together and looked around for identifiers. The 2 camping lanterns sitting on the roof near the now dismantled copter threw only enough light to illuminate about 15 feet in either direction. Damn! Then she heard it, another copter approaching. She leaned back into the shadow, which was some kind of equipment shed that the light of the lanterns didn't quite reach. She watched the second copter land, the blades cycle down and stop, and the same 2 figures come out to carry it off and dismantle the rotors. They placed it next to the first one and stacked the new rotors carefully on top of the previous set. Now intensely curious, Terra watched as 2 more copters landed within minutes and were quickly dismantled in the same way as the first 2. 4 copters at this site. She waited, but no more whap, whap, whap sounds broke through the night. They must be collecting them at other sites, too. Terra's back and arms ached, and she stood to stretch just as the men came back through the door to the roof. One of them stopped and peered toward her hiding place, then started slowly creeping toward her. Oh, shit! She stepped back against the wall of the shed, but something was underfoot, something uneven. Terra lost her balance. She let out a small shriek as she felt herself fall over the ledge, her arms windmilling. "I'm a bat! I can fly! I'm flying!" The thoughts rushed through her mind, even as the air rushed past her ears. She let go, and in that relaxed state felt her wings flutter and catch the updraft between that building and the one closest to it. Phew! Oh, thank goddess! As she lifted upward, she soared past 2 men peering over the edge and caught a few words. "See anything?" one said. "I'm sure I saw something," the other replied, "but I don't see anything now." "Well, if there was anybody there, they're sure not going to bother us now," the first one announced. "We're on the 24th floor." And they turned and walked back across the roof and out of sight through a door leading to a stairway. Terra's bat form settled onto the edge of the ledge to rest a minute and to let her little bat heart settle from hyper-fast beats into normal bat heartbeats. She didn't shift, just waited until she could feel her ordinary self inside her bat body. Once she found center again, she took stock. Tuning out her surroundings, she became aware of a pull-off to one side. As she tuned into it, it grew stronger and stronger until she couldn't help but lift off and fly toward it. She felt the vibration of a keening sound that she couldn't hear, but that resonated inside every one of her bat bones. She swooped through the night, following the pull, and began to feel some familiar energies and smell familiar smells. She felt the air currents and smelled the scents that rode on them above a wooded area, then above a lake. "Oh, my park." Suddenly oriented, she spotted the balcony of her apartment and landed, panting from the exertion of unaccustomed long flight. As she allowed her consciousness to shift, Terra found herself crouched on the floor of her balcony and let herself lean back against the wall, suddenly exhausted. She felt someone standing beside her and opened her eyes to see Joni holding out a glass of water. "You made it, Terra. Thank the goddess, you made it." She took a few cautious sips of water, and as soon as her throat allowed, drained the glass. Joni curled up beside her and reached for her hand. Terra squeezed it, glad for the contact, so glad to be safely back home. She looked around. "Where's Brian?" At the sound of his name, Brian stepped onto the balcony to join them. "Was it you sending me the signal, Brian?" "I had no idea where I was, so I don't know how I'd have gotten home if you hadn't directed me back here." She smirked. Talk about being grateful for a bat signal, even if it wasn't a spotlight with a bat outlined on it like in that old movie. Brian smirked. "Nature's way trumps Hollywood anytime. You followed my sonar signal. I started calling you as soon as I got back here." "But what about the copter you were following? Did you follow it until it landed? And what about the payload? Did you see the chute when it fell?" "I didn't. I didn't see a bloody thing. I got some landmarks, the building where my copter landed, but the money had dropped somewhere along the way, and I didn't see it." She hid her hands in her face, frustrated and defeated. "I didn't. Mumble, mumble." "What?" Joni nudged her. Terra lifted her head. "I didn't think about bat blindness, just bat sonar ability," she restated. "It was so much more important to follow the money." Well, then you'll be glad to know that Brian shifted from bat to owl, Joni interjected, patting her friend's hand to comfort her. He did? Terra sat up. Why didn't I think of that? Probably because your main animal alter ego isn't a flying critter, Terra, Brian commented quietly. Bat, owl, it's not a stretch for me. For you to be able to send your consciousness to any kind of winged one when your primary is a moe is pretty darn remarkable. Please don't feel bad. Terra accepted his rationalization. Okay, that makes sense, Brian. She sighed, feeling the evening's exertions. So, did you see the chute deploy? Could you follow it? Did someone pick it up? He nodded. Yes, and you'll never guess who it was, not in a million years. They both turned to stare at him. Brian looked from one to the other. Cap, or someone who looked just like him, along with a guy in a military uniform wearing Lieutenant Colonel bars. Terra's jaw went slack. Joni gasped. Are you sure? Brian shrugged. My night vision as owl is exceptional, and I had landed on a tree branch right above where the chute fell through the forest. It wasn't even a clearing. I don't know how they found it unless they had some kind of homing device in the bag with the cash. Which makes me wonder about where the other 11 were dropped, and who picked them up. Terra's mouth had closed into a grim line. There's no way, Brian. Not Cap. What the hell? I can't even begin to wrap my mind around this. Joni was silent, her brow scrunched in thought. Holograms? Could they have been holograms, Brian? He shook his head, his face sad. A hologram couldn't pick up a bag of cash, Joni. And this, well, let's call it a version of Cap. Grabbed that nylon and tossed it over his shoulder. He said something to the other guy, but he mumbled and I couldn't catch it. Then they both took off through the woods, not even trying to be quiet. I guess they thought it was remote enough or hard enough to track that they weren't in any danger of being found. I flitted from branch to branch just enough to keep track, and they eventually ended up at one of those indistinguishable, dark sedans the undercover people favor. Tossed the bag in the trunk, got in and drove off. I followed them to what looked like an abandoned tenement building that looked all dark from the outside. Had to circle a few times before I found a window I could squeeze through, though I cut my talon on a shard of broken glass. They instinctively glanced down and noticed a nasty gash on his left foot. Oh, Brian, we better treat that cut so it doesn't get infected. Terra started to get up, but Joni was already approaching with cotton balls, hydrogen peroxide, and triple antibiotic ointment. She sank back down in the sofa. Did you find them again? Terra queried. It took some effort. The hallways were narrow for my wings, so I could only glide in short bursts, but eventually I found a sort of mezzanine, and there was light under a couple of doors that opened onto it. That gave me room to maneuver, but I couldn't tell what was going on inside until one of the doors opened. There were a half-dozen people around a table, and several more of those parachute bags of cash on the table. Did you recognize any of them? Could you identify them, do you think? I wonder. That list Handy gave us. I've got some pictures, but they're in the office. What time is it? Should we go now or wait until morning or... Fuck! How do we interact with Cap now? Do we pretend nothing is wrong? Do we confront him? Do we watch and wait? Damn it, I have no idea how to play this. Joni was positively fuming. Nobody said anything, and the silence stretched as conflicting thoughts and contradictory emotions sent waves of anxiety around the room. Let's think this through, Terra said finally. And let's call on some outside help. Are you willing? I can call for Simeona and Mama to see if they have any insights, can give us some clues as to how to proceed. Joni looked relieved, and Brian too seemed encouraged by the thought of supernatural help. He came over to the sofa where both Joni and Terra nestled and plunked his lanky body into one of the overstuffed side chairs. Okay, Terra, guide us through this.